And you are someone who has been speaking up against Jeffrey Epstein really for years now. And earlier this month, we have seen the House Oversight Committee release a slew of emails and documents related to Jeffrey Epstein through the Epstein estate. And in these documents, a lot of powerful people were mentioned. One of them was your colleague, U.S. Delegate Stacey Plasektt, and her text messages between Epstein and her were released. One was during a congressional hearing. Michael Cohen, Trump's former attorney and fixer, was testifying, and she initiated the conversation with Epstein. Epstein eventually pointed out that Cohen brought up for the former assistant of Trump, Rona Graff. Minutes later, Plaskett then asked about that in the congressional hearing. What's your reaction to learning about that?
That it is all distraction from the main issue, and that is Donald Trump has refused to comply with a subpoena from the House Oversight Committee for months. All the files need to be released. Light needs to be shed, full sunlight needs to be shed on how and who victimized these, aided and abetted and led by Jeffrey Epstein, how and who victimized these teenagers, and ensuring that there is justice brought to ensure that it can never happen again. An email exchange, while certainly less than appropriate, is not really the main issue here. The main issue is that Donald Trump hasn't released the files and he's not complying with the subpoena, and now a federal law that requires him to.
Have you talked with her at all? I mean, I know you said that this was less than appropriate, but looking at that, it was during a congressional hearing.
Yeah, I was on the committee at the time as well, and I was in that hearing. And there were people that were, likely bombarding all of the committee members, recommending and suggesting questions.
But were those people convicted sex offenders?
Who an individual member was exchanging text messages with pales in comparison to the fact that Donald Trump refuses to release these files that he is required under federal subpoena to release. His attorney general is acting as his private lawyer, protecting him and continuing to help victimize the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's heinous crimes. It would not surprise me if down the road he actually commutes the sentence of Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein's groomer. I mean, these are the very serious issues. That issue of who one of my colleagues was texting during a committee hearing is nothing more than a distraction from the fact that the full files need to be released. Donald Trump is required to release them, and we will relentlessly pursue ensuring that these survivors get justice.
I just do want to get back to that, though. Just one more question about that, because you look at all of these messages throughout the years that people had with Jeffrey Epstein. I've seen journalists corresponding with them. That made me deeply uncomfortable seeing a journalist. I have no problem calling out, hey, that's inappropriate, to be not only talking to a source like that, but talking to a source that's been convicted of a sex crime against a minor. Do you think then Democrats should call that out more, should be more firm in calling Stacey Plaskett out? Because are you losing any type of, leg in this fight when you say Donald Trump should not be friends with him? That's disgusting. But then Stacey Plaskett texting him, that pales in comparison here.
It does pale in comparison by a mile. There are 1,000 victims of Jeffrey Epstein. I have spoken to many of them, met with large groups of them many, many times. And their primary concern is making sure that they can continue to cast sunlight on what is in these files, be able to see them themselves, be able to finally get justice, some measure of justice, because the sweetheart deal made it so that they didn't actually have the ability to see him held truly accountable. And at the end of the day, we have to make sure that there are no women, no individuals that can ever be victimized like this again and not have an opportunity to express their concerns in court, hear what the proposed settlement would be if there is one, and not allow a settlement like this to happen ever again. So no, I'm on the list of things that is vast of things I'm concerned about. Who a colleague of mine was exchanging text with is near the bottom of the list of concerns.